Hey everybody, welcome to Studio 64. My name's David. I've been searching the interzones for more science, space and tech news to share with you. Came across this at RT.com. Yes, Russia and China strike major video games deal. This should be interesting. Yes, the agreement is among numerous others sealed during a meeting between the two countries' prime ministers in Moscow. Yeah, this has been interesting to watch. Africa, India, China and Russia, among other nations, have been forming a parallel economy. Yes, it's like when MasterCard and Visa Card pulled out of Russia due to the sanctions over Ukraine. They created the Mir card payment system, which has been taken up by Indonesia, interestingly, plus many other countries as well. So it'll take time, but it's been accepted. It's been picked up quite quickly, actually. Not as many as MasterCard and Visa, of course, but in the short space of time, been quite a few of them. Also with the cars like Renault pulling out of Moscow and manufacturing, it's been very, very interesting. The factory was just basically abandoned. So what did Moscow do? Moscow contacts China and says, "Oi, how about sending them over some of your cars and rebadge them as, former Soviet Union brands?" And they just started making their own cars. It's been very, very interesting to watch. I've made a few videos on it where they just have this building these parallel systems. And it's going to end up where you get two major blocks, east and west again, but two major blocks that are working against each other, but they don't have to rely on each other. That's the interesting part. It's like in Africa, where a lot of the former colonial countries are pulling out, like France and all that sort of thing. The Russians are going in there, and the Chinese, and the Russians are helping them build nuclear power stations because they've got no reliable power and water. So it's very interesting to see. So you'll end up with these, again, as I say, parallel economies. It's quite fascinating. And now it's happening in the video game world. Russia and China have agreed to step up cooperation in the video game industry and promote each other's products, according to a statement released after Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin met with his Chinese counterpart Li Qiang in Moscow. Now, Mishustin welcomed Li on Wednesday the 29th, for the regular 29th regular meeting. I can't even speak today. Brain and mouth are not cooperating. Right, so Mishustin welcomed Li on Wednesday for the 29th regular meeting of the Russian and Chinese heads of government. The Russian Prime Minister stressed the significance of bilateral relations at a time when the contours of the new world are being formed. He touched on Western sanctions imposed on Moscow over the Ukraine conflict, arguing that the illegitimate restrictions are aimed at containing Russia and China's economic and technological potential and ensuring the West's global dominance. Yeah, as I say, it doesn't matter whose side you're on, the Russians and the Chinese have gone, we don't really care. We'll build our own systems and do our own thing. It's interesting. As part of the meeting, the two countries adopted a joint communique that envisages the building of cooperation in the video game industry while pledging to promote each other's products in their respective markets. And speaking of that, I did like the fact that, getting oil from Russia was, because Pooty Poots is such a big meanie, we're not going to buy his oil off him anymore. Yeah. So India bought a whole lot of oil from Russia and just rebadged it and then sold it on. They stick an Indian flag over the Russian flag and just sold the same oil on. I think China did similar things as well. It's quite fascinating, isn't it? We won't buy anything from that big meanie Mr. Pooty Poots in Moscow. Oh, we'll buy that over there. That looks good. What's under that Indian or Chinese flag? Nothing. Nothing to see here. But it's got a sticker on it. Don't worry about that sticker. God, people are stupid. Oh boy, that you're not buying it directly now from Russia, you're buying it from a third party. That's why a lot of energy bills have gone up. Fascinating. A working group should be established with a focus on artificial intelligence with partnership in cybersecurity named among the other priority areas according to the document. And while people are arguing over, I'm not buying anything from Russia, I'll buy it from somewhere else, and not realising that it probably is of Russian origin, they've just been relabelled. The politicians know full well what's going on and are not letting us know and saying how bad evil Pooty is at the same time. It's just complete hypocrisy. In addition, China and Russia have agreed to deepen industrial cooperation, including in the automobile industry, as well as to expand ties in space exploration and humanitarian and educational areas. Yeah, in automobile industry, as I was saying before, importing complete vehicles from China or parts and building their own and all this sort of thing. And one thing that is interesting with Putin, because Russia's such a large country with the vehicles, petrol-driven vehicles in the areas where there's no infrastructure for electric vehicles and in the inner cities has some electric vehicles. Very interesting. Keeps the pollution out of the city. But if you're going on long trips out into the Russian countryside, there's no charging facilities, or you know what I mean. So it's a very interesting way of looking at it, and I think that we should apply that here in the West. You've got countries like Australia. You should try going from the east coast of Australia to the west. Everyone thinks, Australia's only got 26 million people. It must take 5 minutes to get across the country. Probably take you 3 or 4 days to drive across it. Fascinating. Believe me, right out in the middle of an nullarbor plain, you ain't going to find a battery charger for your Tesla. Interaction between Russia and Chinese gamers was on display earlier this year at the Games of the Future in Kazan, where Chinese teams are among the most successful across various cyber disciplines. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin paid a state visit to China in May, the first foreign trip of his presidency, having been sworn in for a 5th term earlier that month, and I bet there was a lot of swearing involved in that too. Fascinating. Putin and Chinese leader Xi Jinping hailed the level of cooperation between the two countries as unprecedented and a model of relations between large powers and neighbouring states. The two heads of state tasked their respective governments with intensifying cooperation in a number of areas, including cross-cultural and technological ties. There goes that mouth and brain again. Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? So they've got cooperation now between the Russians and the Chinese on video game production. Very interesting indeed. And the Russians have built their own versions of Google, and the Chinese have their own versions of AI and all this sort of stuff. As I said, they're completely separating from, they're pulling away from the rest of the world. Very interesting to watch from a, just from a political point of view, and for the future and where it's going to head. All right, well, my name is David. Thanks for joining me for another Studio 64 Science, Space and Tech News update. I shall see you in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate it. If you're up for it, drop a comment down below the video, because I'd love to hear what you think. All right, take care, and as I always say, if you can't be good at it. And as I also always say,
bitch, use your words!